everyone. Thank you for joining us for another countdown to the new year, as today we're going to be discussing the 10 most fascinating Disney people of 2022, as determined by the man next to me the other way, Benjamin, our CEO, and I'm Kyle, the editor. And we're going to be, every year we go through 10 people that have a bigger influence on the Walt Disney Company and that we think are doing interesting things and have roles that, regular Disney fans might not necessarily know about. So we're going to be discussing those and then also naming our person of the year as part of that. So how are you doing, Ben? You doing well? You excited to talk about these people?
I am. And I'm a little okay. So we may have a first here.
Okay.
I normally do the list alphabetically by last name, except the person of the year. And our first person is this man here. He's named Chris Albert. He is Executive Vice President of Marketing and Publicity for National Geographic Content and Disney branded television. So, short answer, he runs the marketing and publicity for, Nat Geo and Disney television, which also includes Disney Plus. Anything that doesn't come from the studios, that's television, right? If you could figure out who reports to what at Disney at this point, you're better than me. But Chris came to us through National Geographic, where he led their efforts over there. And he added to the Disney umbrella last year. And it's interesting in that, sometimes I think we think, oh, outsider, are they going to drink the Kool-Aid? Well, Chris has drunk the Kool-Aid.
And he's dead?
No.
Oh, that's what the Kool-Aid is. I don't know if you knew that.
Well, no, I mean, that was Flavor Aid. Kool-Aid means something different. No, I mean, and he's on red carpets. He is engaging. He hosts the Disney TCA panels and just always has this smile on his face. And if you don't follow him on Instagram, you are missing out. Because he always is just doing the most amazing things. Here he is at the premiere of If These Walls Could Sing from at Abbey Road. If I make it bigger, does it? He's talking about the documentaries. Here he is at the International Documentary Association for Fire of Love. Here he is, he hangs out with his friends, and he's always impeccably
the Getty watermark on one of them.
He can do what he wants because it's his Instagram. But here he is at the National Treasure Edge of History. This is the Roosevelt Hotel where they had the premiere party. DocFest. I mean, it's just he's always has a great outlook, always positive, and is kind of like he obviously only he handles the television side, but is just always having a good time.
The infamous Elton John show.
Yeah, I know. I have lots of questions about these. He posted this the day after it happened, uses this hashtag Where is Chris, but spells it WEARE. Because he's always someplace different. He's always somewhere, but he always has a stylish outfit. So, But what was interesting is I went to pull up his Instagram for this article, and I see this. Truly honored to be named one of your 2022 most fascinating people. Really so cool. And love the shout out from my Insta account. Grateful to also be in such inspired company. I mean, this is the only list I'll ever be on with the insanely talented Quentin Bronson, among others.
Very cool. And Bertie Gregory liked it or commented on it.
So that wasn't my intention, but that worked out for us.
I guess that's a great way to start off the list there. But we still have 9 other people to talk about. So let's.
And this one's not as much fun.
Susan Arnold, she is the chairman of the board or chairperson of the board, however you choose to do it, but Disney calls her the chairman. So we'll go with that.
Yeah. And I think, she's the one that wisely extended Bob Chapek's contract for 3 years, and then 5 months later, fired him. So I think it's an interesting position she's in. It's growing up in the Eisner era, where basically it was the Eisner board kind of did whatever Eisner wanted, and that was sort of a criticism. And then Bob Iger came on, and then he became chairman of the board. So he didn't have a lot of pushback either. In fact, he picked his successor, Bob Chapek. But now you're in a world where the board, partly because of what happened with the Bobs, but also just the economic environment, is being a little bit more firm. So it'll be interesting to see what role she plays. Instead of just being a yes man, which may be part of the reason why Bob Chapek's contract got extended, was giving the CEO leeway to do things. But I think that obviously ended pretty abruptly. So,
well, Chris kind of spoiled our next pick here, but I think it's a good one anyway. Quinta Brunson, the creator and writer and star of Abbott Elementary, which is unfortunately produced by Warner Brothers, but airs on ABC and has been a big hit for them, and is one of the shows I watch on the network. So that's an endorsement.
Yeah, I debated about this one for a long time because the show is not produced by Disney, but I think it's reached the sort of cultural moment where the fact it's on ABC has made it worth, brought it up as really, this is the last successful sitcom to launch on any network. Not that things have gotten canceled, but in terms of something that is actually quite popular, it was the headliner of ABC's Comic-Con presence. Quinta won an Emmy for Best Writing for the pilot. Not only did she, but also she also appeared as as the monster truck in Cars on the Road. So she's part of the Disney family.
Her character might have just driven by, actually.
And you'll see her in the upcoming Hulu show, History of the World Part 2.
Yes. And the show itself also won was it Best Supporting Actress comedy?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I really enjoy this show. I'm glad that it's on Wednesdays now, because those other comedies are what I tended to watch. So I actually didn't catch the show as much when it was on. Was it on Tuesdays or whatever beforehand?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that it's in that comedy block on Wednesdays now. It makes it a little bit more accessible for me, and I've really enjoyed this season so far. Even when they, to your point about how it's not produced by Disney, but they definitely work in that synergy. There was the Halloween episode where you had a bunch of Marvel and other Disney characters. There was a whole episode where one of the students was obsessed with Bluey on Disney Plus. So there's definitely enough Disney-ness there. But moving on to our next pick, that would be Ariana DeBose.
Yeah,
I don't know if
she won
or not. I always just kind of let it hang halfway.
Right. Won the Academy Award for 2021's West Side Story by Disney, 20th Century Studios, and really has become a phenomenon. She also appeared in Hamilton, that's on Disney Plus, but she's going to have a big star turn. Well, I shouldn't say star turn. Hi. And unintentionally did that. She is the lead as Asha in the upcoming Disney Animation Studios film Wish, which is really the centerpiece on the studio side of Disney's 100th anniversary celebration, as it tells the story of the origin story of the Wishing Star. And while the Wishing Star is a pantomime character, she plays a girl who aspires to have her dreams come true. So she sang sort of a show-stopping number at the D23 Expo, which unfortunately few people got to see. But it kind of gave me Let It Go vibes, not in terms of the song or anything like that, but when they premiered Let It Go at the Expo, kind of made that song start its journey to become what it was. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about More for Us, the song that she sang here at the Expo.
So far, I feel like the names we've come up with are ones that Disney fans might have at least heard of. I think that this next one might be the most inside baseball pick of them all. But once you know the story, I think it's a lot more interesting. So why don't you go ahead and tell us who Carolyn Everson is?
So she is a new board member. Yay. She spent most over a decade at Facebook, kind of in ad sales, business development, things like that. She did have about a year tour of duty at Imagineering as a business executive as well, in the 90s, but she joins the board in unusual circumstances. So Dan Loeb has this company, Third Point Capital, and they were purchased, 2% of Disney stock, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when considering that's makes them one of the largest shareholders of the company, it can have an impact. And he was sort of famously disagreed with some of the Disney strategy. He felt they should spin off ESPN. Had some other ideas about going all in on
Hulu into Disney Plus, right?
Right.
That was one of the other big ones, and then other just cost cutting things in general.
And so there was, sort of a hostile takeover vibe to it. So after conversations with Bob Chapek and the board, they agreed on a strategy, but part of the agreement is that they would have this new director, Carolyn Everson, would join the board and would stay on through, and then Dan Loeb would not offer a slate of directors or try and do any sort of increase the ownership stake of Disney or do any sort of takeover attempt until after the 2024 annual shareholder meeting, which would presumably be in March of 2024. So it's sort of a compromise pick, and it's the first time in a long time where the Disney board didn't fully pick their own. They sort of got buy-in from somebody else. Now, if the board, you listen to the board, they go, "Oh, we did a long search, and this is what we came up with." But the press release does include the contract, which says, "Hey, this person is on the board, or else this agreement's null and void." So. Now we don't know a lot. We don't know a lot about what her strategy is going to be or what her position on the board will be. I mean, it's obviously very confidential, but she wouldn't be there if she didn't, at least somewhat agree with Dan Loeb and Third Point LLC's vision for what Disney should be. And this comes at a time when Disney brings on Bob Iger, who may have a very different vision of the Walt Disney Company than Bob Chapek did. And we're still waiting to hear what his vision is going to be. But, how's she going to impact him, a man who, has typically been able to do whatever he wants within reason.
Well, I do have a question on this one before we move on to the next. Dan Loeb, not too long after kind of issuing this press release and explaining what his vision is, kind of backed away, at least from the ESPN point. Was that something that he actually was turned around on, or is that like part of the settlement sort of a thing?
I think he said that he was. And I think in this environment, you need to be careful of saying things that aren't true, just from a securities rules and things. So I think they may, I think he agreed with continuing whatever Bob Chapek's long-term vision for ESPN was. With what level of conviction is really the question, right? Could he be? Yeah. Was it like, okay, yeah, let's try it, or oh no, you're totally right. Those are two different ways of still saying we support keeping ESPN.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to another business-minded pick, Horatio Gutierrez.
Yeah, so Horatio Gutierrez is essentially the top lawyer, and is one of a couple people on this list who got the job under Bob Chapek, but now find themselves reporting to Bob Iger. I would say, most of his time was at Microsoft. I believe most recently he was at Spotify, but replaces Alan Braverman, the beloved lawyer, which is sort of antimatter reaction.
Insert your joke here.
Right. who had been with the company since the ABC acquisition. He actually started with ABC before Disney purchased them. So he is filling some big shoes. Alan did a lot with diversity and development. Once again, not really sure what it's going to be a while before we really get to understand what role Horatio's plays in Disney's legal strategy moving forward. Also, I'm sure he's still trying to figure out what Bob Iger's position on such things are. But as a head lawyer, is a person to kind of keep in mind and know, it's, we're not talking about sort of low level legal stuff here, as securities law, how they protect their intellectual property, governmental affairs, things like that, which has all been sort of, there's a higher focus on these kinds of things just with the rise of social media and people getting into the weeds of Disney's business. It's an interesting position to have. Normally we hear from the chief counsel at the shareholder meeting. So, that might be a chance where, especially during a Q&A session, we may get a little bit more perspective on how he thinks and views the Walt Disney Company.
So next up is one that I think a surprising number of Disney fans are familiar with for one reason or another, and that is Christine McCarthy, the CFO of the Walt Disney Company.
The slender CEO. So, yeah, it's funny because to me, she got a lot of flack for comments that she's made during, investor calls. I will say she's a CFO. She's not the creative executive, right? So she's supposed to be there providing, how they're going to save money and how they're going to make money, which is not really ever really the part that Disney fans want to hear. But it's the audience that this is for investors, whose whole point is to make money on this thing. And so you get comments like, waste, reducing portions, which.
But that doesn't have anything to. Well, she could talk about. That's the thing, though. It's like she can talk about reducing portions as the CFO, but then throwing in that like little joke when stepping out of her lane, that's what gets her into trouble. We're like, that's a little weird.
Yeah, and I mean, she meant no harm by it. It came off as a joke, but then when people transcribe it, it comes across as mean, right? But, she is the one who instigated the ousting of Bob Chapek. I won't say,
reports, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and no one's denying
it, and it's been reported in multiple places.
Right.
So we can very much assume that is the case, or at least a straw that broke the camel's back, sort of a.
Right. And it's been with Disney a long time, and it's been CFO under Bob Iger as well as Bob Chapek. Reports, now this is maybe a little bit more skeptical, but reports came, Bob Chapek was getting ready to throw her under the bus and underestimated her connections in the board. But really, we talk about the time she's put her foot in her mouth, but part of the problem is that Bob Chapek basically made her answer all the questions. And so, she talked a much larger percent of these things than she did under Bob Iger. And Bob Iger hated these things, hated earnings calls, but he still, addressed these issues. Whereas Bob Chapek would have have a less nuanced conversation and then expect Christine to kind of handle the tough parts. So, in many ways, if you're a fan of Bob Iger replacing Bob Chapek, you have Christine McCarthy to thank. And I think probably gave the board the perception of the discontent that was happening amongst other executives that may not have been as forthcoming for, protect their own hide. But
yeah,
it was, there was one report, and once again, it's just a report. I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal, saying that Bob Chapek was going to use her husband's declining health and her previous battle of cancer as a way to convey that she was kind of losing it. And, not great look, but She went out, and I think, well, I don't think she'll become CEO. I think she's going to be she's very solid in her position at this point, given the fact that she is the one who had the guts to make sure the board knew the levels of challenges Disney was facing with Bob Chapek as CEO.
Yeah. Well, I have a question, but it actually perfectly segues into our next pick. Alexis Quadrani is the investor relations person for Disney, and she's the voice that we hear during those earnings calls. And when I'm just listening to the audio, when questions come in, because they say, please just ask one question, and every single person asks two questions. Right. And Alexis is the one who says, hey, Bob, why don't you take the first one? Christine, why don't you take the second one? And you're saying that Christine talked more, but that's probably not Alexis making that decision. You're thinking that they're probably like signaling, and Bob's like, oh, have Christine take that one.
Yeah, I don't think, she's really making that call, right? And they talk about, just like any sort of press briefing, you talk about before, what kind of questions you think will come up. In fact, I think that was, the other straw that brought the camel's back was the poor relationship with the investment community regarding Bob Chapek's last quarter of earnings. Now, once again, she's a person who came in after Bob Iger left and came in under Bob Chapek, came from JP Morgan, long-term analyst herself. I love Lowell Singer. I don't know anything about how he was at investor relations, but he had a great sense of humor. He always handled the investor days, those big presentations, I think, very well. He's one where he was sort of my canary in the coal mine, because when he left, I was like, is he leaving because he doesn't want to work for Bob Chapek or what? And as a new sort of weaker CEO, I don't mean that in terms of skill. I mean that in terms of he's new and doesn't have the, doesn't have the sort of leash that Bob Iger had. This is a very important position, because these are the people that ultimately get to the investment community ultimately gets us to decide who runs Disney, right? They're the owners. Investors is another way of saying owner. It's owner relations. Well, we don't know much about about her because we haven't had an investor day recently, under her term. We've had some calls, but that's not really where you get any chance to really understand her perspective. But you got to imagine she's had a very busy year.
Yeah. Well, we have one more runner-up, most fascinating person before we get to our Disney Person of the Year. And I'm not 100% sure how to say her name, but it is Christina. Is it Shake?
I pronounce it Shaki. So
okay,
I could be wrong. I don't know if I know that. I don't know if I'm doing that because that's how I remember it, or if it's like someone told me that, or if that's just me reading it.
Well, yeah, to be fair, I don't know if I would know Alexis Quadrani off the top of my head, but actually it's pretty phonetical, but I've heard it so many times. Probably, like you mentioned, she was an analyst. Did I hear her name like during earnings calls before that?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay.
So, she's had perhaps a very interesting time. You remember Jeff Merrill?
Yes.
The corporate affairs officer who didn't last very long?
Yeah, it was basically like Disney's version of Anthony Scaramucci.
Yeah, exactly. Worked for ABC News, then was most recently at BP. So he hires her. She was most recently in charge of the campaign for vaccinations, working for the Biden administration. She has a long history of working for Democratic politicians, Michelle Obama, I guess who's not a politician, but close enough, Hillary Clinton, and folks like Maria Shriver, but also had a tour of duty at Instagram, and comes in reporting to Jeff Merrill. Jeff Merrill goes away. she actually happened to lead California's political effort to repeal Prop 8, but then gets swarmed into this, quote unquote, don't say gay bill controversy in Florida. And then Jeff Merrill goes away, and she's now the head of communications. And it's different. Jeff Merrill had a bunch of other things reporting up to him, but she is our new communications person. And if you remember Zen Yamuka, they're typically very tied to the CEO, right? Because they're there not only to make the company look good, but make the CEO look good. And she, in fact, led a pair of conversations with Bob Chapek that fan sites participated in. But now the guy she's supposed to make look good is gone, and there's a new guy who doesn't like the old guy, and now it's your job to make him look good, and at the expense of the old guy, if need be, right? So you have to wonder if she's going to stay, because those are the people who the communications person is always the first one to go, right? But at the same time, if she does, filling Zen Yamuka's shoes protecting Bob Iger is going to be a huge feat. She can probably do it, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And interestingly enough, even though she works for mostly Democrats, her sister, who she's still very close to, worked for Republicans, sort of a Condoleezza Rice Republican with George W. Bush, and worked on the McCain-Palin campaign. So, that's optimistic and helping to bridge the divide that is unfortunately rearing its head at Disney sometimes. No fault of their own, and sometimes at their fault.
Well, I feel like there's a name that's come up again and again. It might give people a clue as to who our person of the year might be. And before we get to it, I have to say, we have a standing rule for this list. And that is, if you become the CEO of the company during the year that we're covering, you also get to be the person of the year. That doesn't mean we like you necessarily, but people didn't understand that 2 years ago. But I think they'll understand it this time, because our person of the year is
Bob Iger. That's a great picture of him. You found that. That's a great picture. Because it's great. You got the Disney history artifacts in the background, just faded out, so it doesn't put the attention on it. But
I think he might be in Andy's room in the background there.
And you got Toy Story in the background there. You can tell he's about to run a marathon, a triathlon,
or write another book.
Yeah, about leadership.
He got up at 4:30 that morning.
No. Yeah, I heard that's a big change. Is now he gets up at 4:45. But yeah, I mean, it's like who else is it going to be? Your name's CEO. It sort of makes you the person of the year because you are the person. So I mean, we've had last year we had Ken Potrak, we've had Jon Favreau, Kathleen Kennedy, Agnes Chu, so many people that don't work there anymore. But I think the big question is he's named CEO in November, Thanksgiving, basically the week before Thanksgiving. It's now the end of the year and we're ready. And I don't think we expected it yet, but in the new year, we expect to really know how Disney's going to move forward. We knew what Bob Chapek's vision for Disney was, whether we agree with it or not. But now we want to, and we knew what Bob Iger's old vision was. But now with a more limited balance sheet, different challenges across the organization and the entertainment industry as a whole, what is he going to do? And I can't wait to find out. Like literally, I can't wait. I am wake up every morning hoping today's the day we get the news of some sort of press conference or whatever. Now we have an earnings call that'll be coming in early February, and then presumably a shareholder meeting in March. But that's what we're waiting for, is to see how he navigates this. It's interesting to me because Bob Iger was always the guy who came up with a decision that was obvious in hindsight, but I never thought of. I remember when I was like, wow, Disney needs like an action adventure brand. Maybe they can like buy some third-rate comic book company, right, and make that their thing and make it into a thing. No, why buy a third-rate? Just buy Marvel, right? Like, duh.
Yeah.
Netflix is, Netflix is we're not getting valued right. Maybe we need to partner with Netflix more or whatever. No, let's just make our own thing. Duh. It's like it's the obvious play that no one else did, but you only realize it's obvious after he's done it. So I think, I'm confident he'll come up with the answers. I can't wait to find out what they are and make myself feel stupid.
Do you have any ideas for where this or next year's shareholder meeting would be?
It's interesting. I wonder if they'll keep it virtual just as a cost savings.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe one more year of that, and then 2024 or 5, it could, depending on their timeline, I think New Orleans, so they can promote their new attraction at both coasts.
I've also heard rumors of DC, so we'll see.
Okay. We have a comment from Gio as we start to wrap things up. I'm hoping as early as next week we can start hearing some news from him. I would imagine so. I feel like this restructuring, he probably wants to get done sooner rather than later. I don't know about next week per se, but I think definitely in the next couple of months you would have to assume.
Well, and we still don't have the proxy statement for the annual meeting. Because we don't know where the annual meeting is going to be. I should check, because that's the kind of stuff that could come out right about now. But, there's usually some interesting things about what the plan is in there. But yeah, I think January is going to be very interesting. We have, Disney 100 launching at the end of the month at Disneyland, and presumably he'll have a big role there. But it's interesting. I don't want to sound negative, because I'm kind of enjoying the hero worshiping. When he comes out as a rock star at Candlelight, it's not so much that I want people to be blinded by, misplaced optimism, but it's an entertainment company. It's Disney. It's okay that people are excited about seeing the CEO.
Has anyone made that hope thing from like the Obama, but put Iger's face on it? Because that should probably happen.
Yeah. He's done nothing, right? The hiring freeze is still in effect. All this stuff that, he's said that they're going to restructure, but we don't really know how that's going to look yet. But it's just faith, and I'm happy for him, because they'll reach a time when the varnish wears off, and I'm going to enjoy this moment. I'm going to enjoy the happiness that he's bringing, even if it's misplaced, because it feels good to be happy.
Fair enough. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. We have some more things we're going to be talking about as we wrap the year up. At 1:00 today, we'll be discussing the top 23 things we're looking forward to from Disney in 2023, as decided by the Laughing Place staff. We'll also have a video to go along with that. And then on a sadder note, keep an eye out for our annual In Memoriam tribute to some of those in the Disney. Lots of Disney legends, unfortunately, passed away this year, so we'll be honoring them. And yes, we'll be streaming on New Year's Eve here and there. We should have a special edition of trivia, perhaps. So keep an eye out. Go to laughingplace.com/TV for LPTV, or just keep an eye on the Laughing Place channel. And we'll be back later today. Bye.